cease to excite me. And it's only fitting that this talk happen on World Turtle Day, as sea turtles are definitely enigmatic. So at the risk of sounding cheesy, I'm going to say that sea turtles have been swimming the oceans since the time dinosaurs roamed the earth. And therefore, it's evident that evolution has definitely been kind to them and has allowed them to adapt and therefore survive in the sea. So sea turtles end up spending most of their life in the sea, but they do come on land during reproduction. Globally, there are about 7 species of sea turtles, out of which 5 are found in India. The absentee ones, which is the Kemp's Ridley, it's found only in the Gulf of Mexico, but it can be found as high up north as Nova Scotia in Canada. The other one is the flatback turtle, which happens to be endemic to the Australasian waters only. These are probably the only sea turtle species with the smallest geographic range. So coming back to the sea turtles of India, the first and the most common sea turtle in India is the olive ridley sea turtle. These are the smallest sea turtle species in the world. And one of the exciting things about olive ridleys is that they exhibit a phenomena called mass nesting, which is basically at the same time more than 100 turtles nesting on one beach. Olive ridleys are found nesting in all coastal states as well as the island groups of the Lakshadweep and the Andamans. Next on the list is the green turtles. These are the second largest sea turtle species in the world. And they also happen to be the second most abundant species in India. One thing that's unique to these green turtles is that they tend to change their diet as they grow. So when they're juveniles, they are omnivorous, or they eat anything and everything. But as they transition to adulthood, they become herbivorous, or their diet becomes mainly plant-based, which restricts their food to being seagrass as well as algae. Green turtles are found nesting only in Gujarat, the Lakshadweep Islands, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but they have been seen in offshore waters of almost all coastal states. The third on our list is the leatherback turtle, which is green turtles are found. Good enough?
Yeah. Just at the end, I think we had a little bit of disturbance.
On the what? Sorry?
Just at the end, we had some kind of disturbance. That was the only thing.
Oh.
Yeah. The rest was fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vandan, you were saying something?
Hello everyone, good evening. Myself, Mrs. Saili Gupte from Mangrove Foundation. I will be your host for today's session. At the beginning, I would like to request you all to keep your camera and microphone off as this session will be live streamed on Facebook. I welcome you all to this webinar on Tales of Turtle Conservation on the occasion of World Turtle Day. The Mangrove Cell, Government of Maharashtra and Maharashtra Mangrove Foundation works towards the protection and conservation of mangroves and marine ecosystem of Maharashtra. Now, I would like to introduce our today's guest speaker, Ms. Nupur Kale. She is a marine biologist and has special interest in sea turtle research and conservation. She has worked on various sea turtle research projects across India as well as in Sri Lanka and Costa Rica for a brief period of time. Currently, she is a part of Marine Conservation Program at Wildlife Conservation Society, India. Now, I would like to request Ms. Nupur Kale to take over the session.
Thank you for the introduction, Saili. A very good evening to everyone and welcome to this webinar. I'd like to start off by thanking the Mangrove Foundation for giving me this opportunity to talk about these marine animals that never cease to excite me. And it's only fitting that this talk happens on World Turtle Day. So at the risk of sounding cheesy, I'm going to start off by saying that sea turtles have been swimming the oceans since when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And therefore, it is evident that evolution has been extremely kind to them and has allowed them to adapt and therefore survive in the water. So sea turtles spend most of their life in the water, but they do come on land for reproduction. Globally, there are about 7 species of sea turtles, out of which 5 are found in India. The 2 absentees are the Kemp's Ridley turtle, which is restricted to the Gulf of Mexico, but it can be found as up north as Nova Scotia in Canada. And the second one happens to be the flatback turtle, which is endemic to the Australasian waters, and it has the smallest geographic range. Endemic is basically, like I said, they have a very restricted geographic range. So moving on to the sea turtles of India, the first and foremost is the olive ridley turtle, which is commonly found in all coastal nesting in all coastal states, as well as the Lakshadweep Islands and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The olive ridley turtle is the smallest sea turtle species that there is, and they also happen to exhibit this unusual phenomena of mass nesting, which is basically at one time over 100 turtles nest at the same time on the beach. Moving on to the next common species in India, we have the green turtle. The green turtle is the second largest sea turtle species in the world, and they are found nesting only in Gujarat, the Lakshadweep Islands, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India, but they are often sighted in the offshore waters of almost all the coastal states. One interesting thing about green turtles is that they undergo a change in their diet. So when they are young, when they're juveniles, they are omnivorous, which means they eat anything and everything. But as they transition to adulthood, their diet becomes mainly plant-based, or they turn herbivorous. The next on the list is the largest species in the world, which is the leatherback turtles. Their nesting in India is restricted to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but they have also been sighted in the offshore waters of many coastal states. In fact, just last year, there was a sighting in Maharashtra of a leatherback turtle. The fourth turtle is the hawksbill turtle. As the name suggests, they have a very pointed snout, or a snout or nose, which looks like that of a hawk. These are critically endangered globally because they are hunted extensively for their shell. As you can see in the image, they probably have the most beautiful shell that there is, and this is used to make purses or combs or other decorative purposes. The fifth species that is found in India is the loggerhead turtle. So there are no nesting recent nesting records for the loggerhead turtles, but they have definitely been sighted in offshore waters of many coastal states. In fact, some earlier records of bycatch also, especially in Tamil Nadu, show that a lot of loggerheads used to get caught in fishing nets. Now, all these sea turtles happen to be either vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered as per the IUCN. And what's the reason for that? So before we move on to the threats, I would like to give a brief introduction of the life cycle of these turtles, which obviously starts with the mating. So the mating between a male and a female occurs in the water, after which the female will come onto the land for nesting. She will dig a pit on the beach where she will lay her eggs. And as you can see in the image, there are some eggs that look different as well. One of the images is also of a nest of a green turtle that you can see laying eggs on the side. Post nesting, there is an incubation period after which the hatchling emerges. Once the hatchling emerges, they use two cues to go into the water. One is the slope of the beach, which is usually sloping into the water. And the second is light cue, which is because of the moonlight that illuminates off the surface of the water. And using these two cues, the hatchlings go into the water. Post hatchling, they go into the developmental stages where they usually reside in deeper waters and spend most of their time feeding or foraging and growing to the size of an adulthood. Once they reach their adulthood, the cycle continues with when they're male and female, they mate, then the nesting, and so on and so forth. In this image, actually, you can see an adult as well as some smaller hatchlings by its side. So as I was mentioning before, all these 7 species, in fact, are critically endangered or vulnerable. And that's because of the number of various threats that they face, both natural as well as anthropogenic or human-made. So in the natural threats, we have rise in temperature, storm surges, predation, or beach erosion. So you will ask, why is rise in temperature a bad thing? So sea turtles depend on temperature, which then determines the sex ratio of a nest. 28 to 32 centigrade is the optimum temperature for a nest to survive. If the average nest temperature is between 28 and 30 degrees, the chances of that nest having more males are higher. And if the nest temperature is between 30 and 32 degrees, the chances of that nest having more females is higher. Now imagine if the nest temperature goes over 30 degrees consistently. That means it will produce only females. It will lead to feminization, which basically means that there'll be less males for reproduction, which in turn will be bad for the growth of that population. Apart from rise in temperature, in recent times, the increase in cyclonic and hurricane activities across the world has also emerged as a great threat. As we have Cyclone Amphan currently battering the West Bengal and Orissa coast, it's as these cyclones or hurricanes, they hit the beach, they end up eroding the beach, or it results in the water coming onto the beach, which in turn can be harmful for the nest. The other threat is natural predation, which is bad for adults as well as hatchlings. In this image on the slide, you can see an adult turtle which was predated by a jaguar. Considering the size of a turtle, this jaguar was able to catch hold of it and kill it and consequently eat it. Moving on to the anthropogenic threats. One of the main threats, anthropogenic or human-made threats, is fisheries-related mortality. And it's in two forms. One is ghost nets and the other is in form of bycatch. Again, ghost nets has been a recent rising concern, because in the last many years, there has been a lot of reports of turtles getting entangled in these ghost nets and getting injured and consequently dying. In fact, a recent study from the Maldives has shown that a lot of the ghost nets that is found in the Maldives comes from India and Sri Lanka. So these ghost nets from India, or these nets from India, are not just impacting the marine life around India, but it's also going and harming marine life in other regions. Bycatch is the other fisheries related threat, where again these turtles get caught in the net and again they get injured, they might also die. A lot of mortality also happens when a turtle gets caught in a net, and if the net is pulled up by the boat immediately, because of decompression sickness, it can cause death in the turtle. The other anthropogenic threats include coastal development such as sand mining or coastal construction. The other forms are barriers in forms of seawall or tetrapod. And then there's light pollution, which is again harmful for adults as well as hatchlings. So in order to address all of these threats, it's really important to conduct relevant research, which in turn will also help us devise a conservation strategy. So in terms of research in India, there has been a fair amount of work that has gone on in the last many decades. To start off with, the Wildlife Institute of India from Dehradun conducted their research on sea turtles on the mass nesting beach of Rushikulya in Orissa. They looked at a variety of things that included mortality of olive ridley turtles, population assessment of the mass nesting population, genetic studies to look at phylogeography. They also conducted a satellite telemetry study on the mass nesting turtles and found that most of the nesting turtles forage in the deeper waters of Bay of Bengal, and some of them go as far as Sri Lanka for the same purpose of foraging. Currently, one of the main organizations that's been working on sea turtles is Dakshin Foundation, based out of Bangalore. They have about 3 monitoring programs going on at 3 different sites. One of the long-term monitoring program is that of, again, olive ridley sea turtles at the Rushikulya beach in Orissa. They also conduct population assessment of this mass nesting population. They're also looking at how nest temperatures are affecting the sex ratios of the nests that are laid there. And they also support a lot of masters or bachelor students who want to come for thesis purpose or for internships. The second long-term project that's at Dakshin Foundation is the monitoring and conservation of leatherback turtles in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. For this project, they mainly look at the nesting success. They look at the extent of predation, and they have also conducted satellite telemetry studies on the leatherback. And as you can see on the map on the screen, the leatherbacks don't go to one place, they actually go to many different places. Dakshin Foundation occasionally also conducts nesting surveys in the Nicobar Islands. Moving on to the third project they have is that of green turtles, monitoring green turtles and seagrass meadows in the Lakshadweep Islands. This study is conducted across three different islands, and they are looking at the varying abundances of seagrass and green turtles in these islands, and also looking at green turtle diet. Speaking of Dakshin Foundation, they are also hosting the Turtle Action Group, which is a consortium of over 25 coastal NGOs that work dedicatedly towards sea turtle conservation. Now, TAG is an amazing platform because it brings together individuals who are passionate about sea turtle conservation from different coastal states. And these individuals belong to coastal communities, and more often they support or they actually provide the backbone that is important for research as well as conservation in those regions. You can see on the map there are various NGOs from almost every coastal state that work, that are part of TAG. And obviously there are a lot more from Orissa because there are a lot more turtles that are found in Orissa. But if you look closer at the Maharashtra coastline, you will see one representation in form of Sahyadri Nisargamitra. So moving on to the turtle conservation in Maharashtra, Sahyadri Nisargamitra was instrumental in actually conservation work in Ratnagiri, not just on turtles, but on many other species as well. But they were extremely crucial in starting this ecotourism initiative in a village in Ratnagiri called Velas, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of and probably been to as well. This ecotourism initiative is quite unique, where they are able to manage tourism as well as sea turtle conservation. And now for the last many years, it's actually been managed by the village itself and does not require help from any outside entities. The conservation work that Velas does is in form of ex situ conservation, which is a hatchery. A hatchery is basically an enclosure on a secure part of the beach where turtles that are vulnerable to predation or erosion or inundation are moved to in order for them to hatch. Similarly, in Ratnagiri, a little south is also Anzarle town, where for the last many years, they've also been conducting the Turtle Festival, something similar to what's happening in Velas. And I think they've also been doing quite well for quite some time now. In addition to these two villages, I think most of the coastal communities along Ratnagiri are actually involved in turtle conservation, and they work as beach managers or hatchery managers, and they routinely patrol the beaches. If they find any nest that might be in danger, they then move it to a hatchery on the nearby beach. But if we go further down south from Ratnagiri to Sindhudurg, there are as many dedicated individuals who are working on sea turtle conservation. And one of the commendable things about some of these individuals in Sindhudurg is that they are actually involved in situ conservation, which is basically protecting the nest where it is. It's highly recommended, but at the same time, it's very difficult to sort of do in situ conservation, because you need to ensure that the material which you're using to form the cage or the net, as you can see here, is sturdy enough to ensure that no predator can get in, or also you need to monitor it constantly, because it's basically a signal for, let's say, poachers, maybe that, there's a nest here, you can come and poach that nest easily. So it's extremely commendable that they are actually conducting a lot of in situ conservation in Sindhudurg. The other, well, good and bad thing you can say is that a lot of reports of turtles getting caught in fisher nets have been publicized or, are being informed of. Now, it's a bad thing because, well, turtles are being caught in the net, but at the same time, it's a good thing because at least the fishermen are aware enough to go and inform someone that this has happened. And they are not shying away from it, which just means that there's a lot of awareness within them, and they realize that, there's something wrong. Why are these turtles getting caught in the nets, and how they can improve it. So just to sort of conclude the webinar, I would like to say that conservation of any species or any habitat is basically a puzzle. And all of us researchers, or all of us people from the forest departments or people from fisheries department, could be grassroots NGOs or coastal communities, all of us basically form smaller pieces of these puzzles. And once we all come together, I think that's when conservation really succeeds. So with this, I'd like to end my talk. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, please enter those in the chat box. So attendee 27 has asked, can we track their movement? So like I mentioned before, that the Wildlife Institute of India as well as Dakshin Foundation actually used satellite telemetry to track the movement of the nesting turtles that nested in Orissa or the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So yes, we can definitely track their movements. It's an expensive thing to do satellite telemetry. You can also try tagging turtles using metallic tags. But again, yeah, satellite telemetry is probably the best to track their movements. What would I like to say about illegal trading of turtles? So currently in India, as far as I know, there's not a lot of, or there isn't illegal trading of turtles. In India, they are protected under the Wildlife Protection Act, and I think everyone is aware that if any turtles found, then they are basically done for. But I do know that globally, elsewhere in the world, there is still ongoing trading of turtle, either for meat, for medicinal purposes, and whatnot. So yeah, that's the bit on illegal trade. So the temperature range of sex determination is different in different species. Not really. It varies very little, but it's pretty much the same. And when I'm talking about turtles, I mean sea turtles mainly. Is it possible to tag turtles? It is definitely possible to tag turtles, but like I said before, they are protected under the Wildlife Protection Act. So you need to get permits from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in order to be able to touch these turtles, to tag them. Somebody has asked what diseases that affect them. So honestly, very honestly, I'm not very much aware of the diseases that affect them. But one disease that I do know is a form of cancer that mainly plagues green turtles. Touch wood, not the green turtles of the Indian Ocean as far as we know, but it's a very common thing that's seen in the Pacific Ocean, the green turtles of Pacific Ocean. And that's actually been one of the leading mortalities of green turtles in that part of the world. Are existing regulations sufficient for conservation of these species? In a way, they are, because people know, again, as soon as you hear that something's a protected species, there's an inherent fear of getting caught and getting imprisoned. So there's definitely, in terms of regulation, I think they are sufficient for the conservation of this species. And I think, again, there needs to be a lot of awareness amongst people like you and me also, which eventually helps conservation. What is the major reason behind a turtle being caught into fishing nets? Well, the ocean is their world, so they might be foraging in that area, they might just be passing through, they might be coming up on surface to catch a breath. I guess it's usually when they come closer to the surface to catch a breath is when they get caught in fishing nets more often. Is there any special turtle conservation program run by or initiated by the MOEFCC? They have recently initiated some long-term monitoring in collaboration with really good scientific institutions. I don't know if you know, in February around the CMS COP, they also actually they've actually also put in place a marine turtle conservation policy. So yeah, but I don't think there's any turtle conservation program that's actually sort of run by them. Can you tell me more about the number of olive ridley female turtles coming to the shore over a period of time? Is the population affected? I don't know what you mean by that question. Maybe I'll come back to that later. But the next question is, how do we determine the sex of a turtle? If you want to determine the sex of a hatchling, it's very difficult. You can't just look at it and tell what sex it might be. For that, you have to use invasive methods, or then if you find a dead hatchling, then you can go in the laboratory and conduct histological studies to find out what their sex is. For adult turtles, it is easier sometimes because you can use certain morphological characteristics to tell if it's a male or a female. Quite often, people use the tail as an indicator of whether it's a male or a female. But then again, sometimes it can be quite misleading in terms of really finding out the sex of green turtles. Sea turtles. Do you find any feeding ground of green sea turtle along Maharashtra coast? Well, I think there might be, because as I mentioned before, that off the coast of Sindhudurg, they do find a lot of juvenile green turtles that get caught in their nets. So there's a high possibility that there's actually some good feeding ground off the coast of Maharashtra. Definitely something to be looked into, but it'll be difficult for sure. How light pollution affects turtle movement and what are the solutions? So light pollution affects turtle adults and hatchlings. In adults, it can serve as a deterrent to nesting turtle. Sometimes nesting turtle gets scared or get frightened when they see light, and then they might just go back into the water, perhaps come few nights later and nest when she thinks it's safe or something. For hatchlings, it's a bad thing because, as I mentioned in my talk, they use two cues. One is slope and the other is light that comes off the moonlight. So because they use the moonlight to orient them towards the water, in case you're at a place where the light on the landward side, or let's say there's a highway or some street there with a very powerful street light there, the hatchling will immediately turn around and start going towards the street light because that has a stronger illumination, which in turn will result in dehydration of the hatchling, higher chances of predation, and eventually mortality. Solution is basically, well, reduce coastal construction is one. And for perhaps the pre-existing homes and lights, what we can do is we can just put red light filter over these lamps to ensure that you know, the light is not bright enough to disorient these hatchlings. In India, ex situ conservation is how much successful? So in India, ex situ conservation has been quite successful. I guess it's a credit to people who are conducting the ex situ conservation, because globally, ex situ conservation or hatchery results have not been very great. So yeah, I think comparatively it's been better in India. Obviously, it varies from state to state because of a lot of reasons, but yeah, I think it's sort of good to go so far. Is turtle eaten by human? is there like that any anthropogenic region? Okay, so turtles are eaten by human beings. Like I said, some turtles are eaten for their meat. Eggs are eaten. Again, it's not very common anymore because there's a lot more other kind of food that's available. But for people who don't have easy access to food, I think it's just easier to go and dig out an egg. But again, like I mentioned, it's very less now. Where are the organizations which truly work for the conservation of turtle? So I showed a slide of Turtle Action Group. If you just Google them, you will find out all the organizations that work all across the Indian coasts on turtle conservation, and all of them are truly dedicated towards sea turtle conservation. And you should definitely hear the stories they tell. It's amazing. So I'll attendee 124, please do Google Turtle Action Group, and you can also get in touch with those NGOs. Because of turtle, any allergies are produced in humans? Interesting question. I don't think so, unless you're allergic to the sand where they come to nest, or allergic to the water where they are in the water. Well, when they are in the water. Okay, I think that's about it for Q&A. If you do want to know more about Mangrove Foundation, or if you have any questions for me, you can definitely reach out to us and ask us.
Thank you so much, Nupur ma'am. I guess you have answered almost all the questions in the chat box. And it was really an informative, wonderful session. Now, I would like to request our Executive Director, Mr. Virendra Tiwari, APCCS Mangrove Cell, to express his thoughts.
Thank you, Nupur, for such a nice and interesting presentation. It was very informative. I hope all the participants who were listening must have been gained from this presentation. Just to add a few things, what you were saying about the recent draft policy which Government of India is coming up with for conservation of turtles. Very recently, there was a final meeting. They had circulated the revised draft, and all the state governments were and Chief Wildlife Warden and some major NGOs, particularly Dakshin Foundation and other experts, were asked to participate in that webinar. And the final, I think, comments have been given by the states as well as the experts. And very soon, I think the final policy may be circulated by Government of India. In addition to this, as you know, our Mangrove Foundation, which was established in 2015, is also doing its little bit in conservation of turtles. You already, Nupur, explained about the efforts being done by the volunteers and the Sahyadri, the NGO Sahyadri in Ratnagiri district. Very recently, we learned that for last 1 year, the volunteers and the beach managers had not received the compensation. We give them some honorarium which was pending for almost an year. So which normally was paid through some other fund. And first time when we learned that for 1 year no payment was made, we cleared the payment. We made about 15 lakh rupees was paid to all the volunteers and the beach managers. And other than that, whenever the state government has also come up with a policy that whenever a turtle or any other marine animal gets caught in the net, fishing net, and when the fisherman cut the net and releases the animal, in that case we give compensation up to 25,000 rupees. And for that they have to submit the proposal along with the documentary proof, the photographs, and maybe a video showing the actual release of the animal and cutting of the net. And these proposals come to Mangrove Foundation through Fisheries Department after recommendation. And so far we have, in 59 cases, we have given compensation of more than 11 lakh rupees. So these are the some very small efforts which we have started for this conservation of turtles and other marine animal. And we definitely, in future, we are going to expand our contribution to the cause. And I once again thank the organizers from our Mangrove Foundation for this talk, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. At the end of the session, I would like to thank our officials for supporting and encouraging us, as well as to all the participants for participating in this session from around the globe. Lastly, I would like to request you all to kindly follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The handles you can see on your screen. Thank you so much, and have a safe time.